So starting off with Harry Ambrose's story in this episode, he follows Glenn Fisher in the middle of the day, and Glenn Fisher ends up parking at a strip joint. We see that Glenn has the stripper go in the back seat with him. We learn from the stripper that he's actually not even into sex. And that connects to her feet there with all those markings. The same ones that Carmen Bell has in the loony bin. So Ambrose connects this, and then he goes to see Carmen Bell at the hospital, and he runs into Mr. Magoo in the hallway here, and he learns from this old man that someone called Carmen and she said it was Satan. This was the beginning of a lot of oddly timed things in this episode for me, and this felt super convenient that this old man just walked out and gave Detective Ambrose this information. So I wasn't too crazy about that. And then Ambrose immediately is able to get a lead on who's following him, because he connects the dots and sees that the number that called Carmen in the hospital was the man following him. So the officer at the station hooks him up with where this guy lived. So this kind of pumps up the episode, and Ambrose finds pictures of himself, which is kind of crazy. Then finds this man was totally looking into his case with Cora from season 1. And he sees his mom's obituary and an article on the fire that happened. But the most important thing in this scene is he finds Carmen Bell's missing tape that this man took. So then we get a kind of random scene where Vera visits Julian, and she's ticked off, obviously because he has cuts on his arm, but also because he's heavily sedated by the cops there, and she freaks out. And they never really touch on this whole thing again, and it kind of felt out of place and unnecessary to even have him sedated in the first place to make this a big plot point. We already know she wants him out of that jail, so this was, to me, pointless. So then, connecting back to the Ambrose storyline, Ambrose meets up with Vera at her place and shows her the tape of Carmen Bell, and he sends this also to Heather at the same time. So to me, this all kind of felt very silly and sloppy, and like the old man in the hallway in the scene before the Ambrose, this is really just putting everything on a plate for us. I mean, in a sense, this scene's good because it adds weight to Vera's character and her being confronted with this guilt she's been suppressing and all the bad things she just let happen at this camp. And it gives her some humanity. But it's also kind of ridiculous that Carmen just lists off all the answers really quick for us in this tape, conveniently. So she says the name of that lake, and Heather makes a note of this. She also answers about the burns on the feet, and that a man in the sessions did this, obviously Glenn Fisher. And it also mentions her getting pregnant. So it's like answering every single question in one tape, which to me just felt lazy. And Ambrose then confronts Vera here and is like, there's all these abuses going on in Mosswood that weren't known about, but you knew about it. Then finally Vera goes, fine, sit down, I'll tell you all. Okay, so this happening right here and then leading to an overlong flashback just did not feel like The Sinner to me. These past 2 episodes have not felt like The Sinner we know and love. It's taken a nosedive. Instead of slowly having a good pace where you come in and out of flashbacks like Sinner Season 1 while Cora was explaining what happened, this is just like, let's set up a long flashback where someone just goes, before it cuts to the flashback, I have to tell you something. Okay, I'll fill you in. And it's just insanely long and leaves the actual present time for too long. And the way the show's been edited this season, it's not really transferred well. It doesn't feel in a flow with the present time. It's just, okay, did Vera tell him all of this? Were there parts she left out? It kind of is just confusing. It doesn't have a good setup scene to go into this flashback, and when it gets out, they don't even really acknowledge what she just talked about. It makes it feel like the flashbacks are in their own world. Like, who is exactly the narrator here? I know we're supposed to think it's Vera, but it's just not clear enough. What's Ambrose's reactions while she's telling these certain things? They did that so well in season 1 where they just didn't even touch on that here. So the reason this flashback feels really drawn out is we're just reiterating what we already pretty much knew here, and that was hinted at from last week. Just showing us again how creepy this, I'm going to call him Kevin Spacey 2.0 is here, how violent the ceremonies get, and how resistant Vera really was deep down. And what's hurting this is I don't think this approach is working for a show we know is only going to be 8 episodes. This might have worked better in a continued series where it's more seasons, but that's not the case here. We don't know anything still about this Kevin Spacey 2.0 guy, besides him just being an evil person. And what threw me off was when he says to Vera, it's only when Abraham sacrificed his son Isaac that God rewarded him. So we've learned this guy is a former psychiatrist And now he's also a religious zealot. When did that start happening? And this is now confirming that line that clearly they're going to use Julian like they use the goat here as a sacrifice. That's his goal. But why is this man really like this? How are we going to have time to even know this character in 2 episodes left after this one? And then we get a scene with Marin giving birth and having this quick lactating drama with Vera, and us just reaffirming why Vera was attached to Julian, and how Marin, who everyone saw coming, wasn't going to fill that mother role well. So what made me uncomfortable about this scene is, where is this plot hole here where this guy's making a bunch of women pregnant, and I know he's brainwashing them, but no one's going to acknowledge that this is a rape baby and that Marin is having this child with no angst about it, meaning she's not mad at this guy. He's laying on her belly and she doesn't even care. That doesn't make any sense to me. I just don't understand what this is all leading to. The whole point of this flashback, again, just, oh, we get it. All these people are nuts and Vera really loves Julian. Come on, this is just sloppy now. And why the Sinner is so effective in the past is because it's so good at keeping such a mystery with not showing all its cards. And these past 2 episodes feel like they've been showing all their cards. And even though they haven't answered everything, I feel less and less interested in what's going to happen these last 2 episodes. And then we get a scene where Vera puts a stop to a ritual they're going to have, knowing Marin can't do this anymore. And Glenn Fisher with these guys come in a truck and they're pissed about it. And to me, this was just over-the-top acting on their part and way too intense and evil. I don't buy this happening for a second. This is a huge jump for them to act like this. These were all really peaceful people at first when they were first doing their ceremony, and it started getting a little violent by each person, but there was still resistance. They don't really show a great transition to them becoming full-on extremists now and missing one ritual. It's just absurd to me. You're getting all these cartoon-type villains now. And some really weird directing here and writing, okay? Because, like, this whole flashback was just a mess. And I know I'm being hard on it, but I have such high standards for the Sinner that this is just red flags. And it upsets me. So this scene now with Kevin Spacey 2.0 with Vera and then with Marin standing behind Vera, he tells the baby to shut up like twice, which is just absurd. Even some of the worst people don't just say that right away. It just felt off the timing. And then he's just like, you gotta stop caring for the kid, Vera. You're too attached. Like, what? After him seeing one moment of her breastfeeding, he's flipping out and doesn't want her doing it anymore. And he's really mad that she canceled that ritual happening and is talking about Marin right in front of her. And Marin's standing right there. Can't Marin speak for herself? They just have a conversation about this girl while she's just standing there awkwardly behind them, doesn't say anything. Just felt completely unrealistic, this scene. So then Vera gives a tea as an apology to Kevin Spacey 2.0, and do we think she gave him the poisonous plant that Julian gave Bess and her boyfriend? I'd love to hear you guys' theories on that. And then it does this weird editing where just, bam, it cuts to Vera and Ambrose in the cabin together. So I guess we're supposed to assume she told Ambrose all of that, but it's so bunched together and so much information overload. I would have liked to see Ambrose's specific questions and responses to each thing she said. I don't find it believable that he would just sit there in silence and listen to the whole thing. It's being lazy on the show's part. And I think a result of this is this episode and the past one feels all just rushed together now. Because maybe they went for too much in this season. There's so much going on and so many characters are giving a lot of time to, that they're trying to squeeze in all this stuff to care about, but then it just kind of feels empty. And then we learn that Carmen Bell pursued legal action that was never filed, and that it was basically covered by Glenn Fisher and District Attorney Hutchinson, who's a very corrupt man who we know nothing about again. Another cheesy villain here. He took money to throw this case under the rug. This is all about him staying elected. And Ambrose lays into him, threatening him that he's going to tell papers about it, and he wants to get Julian now transferred to family court. And there was one line here that was really cringeworthy, was Ambrose was like, oh, there's a lot of smoke here. The way it was just presented, woof. And what made The Sinner so special was it didn't feel like a USA show. Because USA has a lot of bad reputation with a lot of TV shows for being cheesy, over the top, etc., etc. But The Sinner was changing that a lot, as was Mr. Robot. Things that could be taken seriously, but this just feels like USA writing again. And it makes me wonder how important it was season 1 was based off a really good book. And then we get this crazy flip where Heather calls Ambrose and invites him to the crime scene where they found Marin's body from the lake, and Heather's just like admitting to Ambrose she was wrong to just push him out like that. And this is a really quick flip here, and all that drama that happened with Heather and Ambrose last episode is already resolved in the next episode. So what was even the point of Ambrose being taken off the case in the first place? He still did what he had to do, and then they just made up the next episode. Seems completely pointless. So they find Marin's skeleton from the lake. Right now we can assume it's her, but it might not be yet. It's not totally confirmed, so we will see. And then we get to see now Julian switch to a foster home. Ambrose really hooked him up here. But I feel like Julian's story here took a back seat. I feel disconnected and not caring to him now. Whereas in the beginning, he was a star here, and his murder was the most important thing, but it's just added to so much other stuff going on in that cult, especially with Vera, that he just seems like a little back piece now, and it's frustrating. And then we get this scene with Jack Novak and his daughter Heather in the bar, and they get in a huge fight. And he seems happy in a way about the news that Marin was found, and this ticks off Heather, rightfully so, but he wants her to move on finally. He says to her, "You are the most important thing to me." She's like, "You don't act like it." But I feel like he does, though. Who else is he giving attention to? He still lets her live at the house, and this falls into an overdone situation in a lot of shows here with the classic wife died, doesn't know how to properly take care of his daughter and cope with that, because she mentions, "Why don't we ever talk about mom?" That just feels out of left field here. And again, who cares? We barely know this character, Jack. He's just been a jerk in random places, and he's been given way too much screen time. But a positive of this episode is we get a great scene of Julian Ambrose here at the foster home. It's one of the strongest scenes of the season, and when they're two together, a lot of magic happens. And Julian's learning. He's seeing that Bess and her boyfriend won't start over when they die. And Ambrose has kind of been like a father figure to Julian, giving him correct moral values now, more realistic values. And this great talk about guilt happens. And Julian fully admits to Ambrose now that he did it, but Ambrose explains it's more complicated than that. And Julian's like, "When do you stop being guilty? When is it over?" Great line by Julian, and then he says, "I'm not sure." And this kind of relates to Vera as well, with all her guilt she has of things she's known that's gone on at this cult. So this connected everything well in this episode between those three characters. And then we see an effective flashback like it was in Sinner Season 1 in the beginning of the season as well, where it directly relates to what Ambrose is talking about at the moment and cuts back and forth. And it shows he started the fire in the house with his mom in it. Thought it would help his sick mother. He just wanted her pain to stop. And it's a good connection between him and Julian, because it seems like they're both were good-intentioned kids with bad guidance. And now this explains why Ambrose would say to him, it's more complicated than him just being the one who killed these people and feeling that guilt. Because how much can you really blame a kid when he does bad deeds? Because there's also a part of the parenting there, especially if he had good intentions. So I like how this all connects between the two of them, and it really gives us good depth and darkness to Harry Ambrose now. And that's my favorite thing about this season, is them going to his backstory and how it has been effective. And I love how Ambrose is like, stare down that hooded thing next time you see it before it ruins you. And he says he thinks that might be the guilt. And he grabs Julian's hand. Really cool stuff here. And it leads to a terrifying scene where Julian actually sees the hooded person again, but this time it's real. This is no dream. So this worked really well and was built up great. Was it Kevin Spacey Diet Coke version? Was it Marin? Is she still alive? Was that skeleton a red herring? Let me know what you think down below. So this episode finished really strong. The ending was great. But overall, this episode was a letdown. Way too long on flashbacks, slop job, and a lot of unrealistic stuff here. And it crushed a lot of momentum. I also feel like certain characters we have too much time given to, especially Heather's father and Vera. It's like there's too many mouths to feed this season in such a short episode count of 8. Because of that, it causes a rushing feeling and not great focus. And there's been a lot of cheese here too. It's sad because these past 2 episodes make me feel like the mystery feeling season 1 had so brilliantly and the beginning of this season had, which was great, is completely gone. What are we really looking forward to now? Seeing Kevin Spacey get caught and justice served to him? Or this guy Glenn Fisher getting caught that we don't know anything really about? That's not mystery anymore. That's just like, okay, we know what's up. These guys are messed up. Let's go catch them. So I feel like episode 5 last week was the beginning of a nosedive here. I'm hoping the last 2 episodes of this season can pick up here and get back in the right direction and feed off this great ending of this episode. But this was the first bad episode of The Sinner for me in both seasons, unfortunately. So I'm giving it a 6.8. Let me know what you thought below. Maybe you guys loved it. Maybe I'm not seeing what you're seeing. Give me any of your thoughts. I'd love to hear it. Maybe you agree with me. I'd love to hear that as well. Please follow me at SteveVarley1 for more of me on Twitter and Instagram. And please subscribe. I will be reviewing the rest of Sinner Season 2. I'll also be doing American Horror Story. Currently doing Better Call Saul. And I will be doing Walking Dead. So hang in for those as well. And I'll see you next time.